I suppose it's very hard to say it's a good evening, but here we are. Omar, I'll start with you. You worked with Xolani at 702, where he was when he took ill and sadly passed away. How did you receive the news?
I got a call this morning, and when I saw that it was from Tabisile Mbete, the station manager of 702, she didn't have to say a word. I knew exactly why she was calling me. So it was shocking, despite the fact that we knew that he was very, very ill, particularly in the last few weeks. But what we always expected, and those who listen to 702 will know this, is that he was such a fighter, he was so courageous, he was so brave, that when he first heard the news of the cancer that he had at stage 4, people didn't expect him to live for longer than a few months.
In 18 months he fought.
Correct. So that tells you about the courage, the character. And he had his children and his family to fight for, and he did. So it was shattering for everybody, because we really did. We got him back. You'll remember, he came back. He wasn't expected to come back.
Yes.
He had a show named after him in the afternoon, a 1-hour show, so that he wouldn't be exhausted, because we knew he would still need to carry on the chemotherapy. But everybody at 702 said, this guy is so strong, he's so brave, he's so courageous, that our expectation was he would be back.
And Asanda, your relationship with Xolani goes back to simpler times, I think more than 10 years ago, in the corridors of the SABC. When the young Asanda Makaka arrived at the SABC, meeting what was already such a big name in broadcasting, how did that go down?
You know, Tembekile, our paths actually crossed before I got to Auckland Park. You remember that before I came to Auckland Park in 2007, I was in the Eastern Cape Bureau based in Port Elizabeth. And he would come because you remember the show as Kulume would have those incredible town hall meetings around election times, and some of those productions would be done from the various stations throughout the country. So our paths would cross. Even then, I would engage him. I looked up to him, and I would engage him, and his executive producer, Mr. Vincent Fundisi, is distraught at this moment. So that bond started sooner. When I got to Johannesburg, he was one of the people who received me. He's such a mega star, incredible star power, but what always struck me about him was the fact that he would get to Port Elizabeth or Butterworth or wherever, and the way he would relate to people. I know that when he was in studio and the issues of the day in that particular municipality, he took complete ownership of them in the way that he engaged the powers that be. One of the things that used to fill me with so much pride was that he handed the baton to me for Askhulume. So that was not by design, because I was preparing to present a different show in the public interest. And we would sit, he would take his time to guide me, teach me and tell me how this game works. I'd never been on television. I'd been a radio broadcaster from the beginning of my career. And you can imagine how massive a stage that was. And he guided me very patiently. Great times were spent. And however, he then had to leave and he went to work overseas. And because
in the Middle East,
in the Middle East, and being Mtuga, you know, and you know I'm Mtuga. And the thing is, I was happy doing in the public interest. It was a nice platform. It was big enough for me, person wet behind the ears. Then he leaves, and at the time, the person who was able to do isiNguni and English broadcast fluently in both languages was me. And I'd been a product of his hands, his training, his skilling, his advice. I'll never forget preparing my own auto-cue script. And one of the things that used to fill me with pride was having to put my name in his place, because you have to type over it, don't you? Prepare my own script, how we intro into the show as Kulume Let's Talk. And that's what I would do, because he had prepared me, perhaps not for his place, but I found myself having to succeed him. you can never succeed Xolani Gwala in any capacity. He was massive. He was exceptionally gifted. You know, when you look at Xolani, hear his voice, see the way he looks. He was born for that stage.
And I want to take that for a moment, and we'll come back to you and bring it to you, Omar, because during the time that Xolani was ill, Asanda, the likes of myself and another EWN colleague, Clement Manyatela, then took turns, of course, filling in for him on that hour on 702, 12 to 1. And his kindness and just unique approach to journalism and the way we do things is what endeared him to an extent where every day the listeners would ask after Xolani, even though he'd been at a point off air for almost a year. And I suppose that is what made him such a big personality, larger than life.
They say that about audio, about radio, that the ear picks up someone's authenticity and sincerity. It's much easier to cover that up on TV. You're looking, so all your senses aren't as alert. But when you're listening to the radio, you can pick up someone's genuineness and their authenticity. And I think that's what people picked up on, the sincerity, the humility. That's the remarkable thing. Asanda's talking about being mentored and trained. But even with someone with all that vast experience, every day he would ask how he could be better tomorrow. That's a humility that's very rare sometimes in our profession. And that you admire about him, because he always knew there could be a way that he could do it differently or better. And I remember Clement talking about that story on the radio today when Xolani had the opportunity to interview the president. And you would think he would just walk in there and know exactly, because he does. We know that he's the consummate professional. But he goes up to Clement, who's significantly his junior, and says, "Do you have some advice for me?" And that's the character of the man. It's really incredible.
And it wasn't it, Asanda. I mean, when you walk around the halls of 702 and you bump into Xolani, it was almost as though he didn't quite have a full grasp of just the giant in the institution that he was, and he almost shied away from praise. Did you find the same?
Exactly the same, Thembekile, and I understand why. What set him apart is exactly what Omar is mentioning, the qualities that I've seen a lot of people highlight, and I'm so happy to see that all of us more or less have the same tale. It talks to the authenticity Omar was talking about. You don't have to pretend to be that way. It is who you are. I want to just mention, Thembekile, that I didn't want to come here today because I think understandably all of us are experiencing some very profound grief. But one thing I had to say to myself is that we're talking about top class professional here, the finest in the game. And this, the broadcast space, would have been the arena where so why would I want to sit with my grief and silence at home alone when I can come and pay tribute to him? Did he not train me to be this professional? If all of us could just sit with our grief, who would be doing what you're doing tonight? That's something I learned from him. I was saying to myself, what would he do if the roles were reversed? The professional would have jumped out, even at a moment like this when all of us are so deep in grief.
Because the show goes on, doesn't it?
The show goes on.
And Omar, the show did go on with Xolani's name, even when he was off air for months. A lot of people today really commending the way in which 702 and Prime Media as a group stood by him. It's not common, especially in our business where many of us are freelancers who are often replaced at the drop of a hat. Why did the company decide to do that when, for commercial and other reasons, you could have easily decided to go with any other name?
It's culture and values. We speak about treasuring the people that work at our organization. And when they are in the deepest trouble is the last time that we should think about neglecting them. They give every day. The people who work for our organizations give of themselves. They create the connection with the audience. And when they are in trouble, to walk the road with them is the right thing to do.
Asanda, as we conclude, and I see you've got something on your mind as well, but if you could have addressed him one last time, what would you have said?
You know, young boys and girls, there's some watching you right now, Thembekile. I was one of them once upon a time, watching this incredible man on television. But he was my friend, he was my mentor. And I think sometimes we forget that there's these youngsters coming from the most far-flung of places, remote places, places where it is not expected that you would reach the level that Xolani has reached and become the person that Xolani has become, even if he didn't bandy it about. But I just want to thank him because not everyone takes the time to hold you by the hand. Been blessed. I talked about getting the baton from him, but to have walked in the footsteps of a giant, literally succeeding him, shows that he's doing them. I could never be the class act that he could have been, but any time that he engaged me, he made me believe I could be. And I think that the broadcasters that we later become are largely in part of the people who teach us patiently. He was that person, good person. Deepest condolences to his family. Truly, we have been blessed as a fraternity to have witnessed and lived in his time, practiced as journalists in his time. Incredible professional, consummate, top class. Agna luto that one can say at this point, except to say, you have really done your best. You have fought bravely, and it has been my supreme honor to know you.
And Oma, I want to end with you about the most important people during this dark time, Xolani's family, his wife Peggy Sue, and the children who have been on this journey with him as well. Is there any word from them? How are they feeling? I know there's been the appeal for just space as they go through this difficult time.
Yes, I mean, obviously all of us who were part of the Prime Media family wanted to go and see him, particularly when it was really tough. We all had the opportunity, and I visited his home a number of times earlier when he looked like he was going to recover fully and come back to us. But in these past few weeks, they've asked us to respect their space. And I'm sure I mean, imagine these 3 daughters. This is the most difficult thing any family can ever experience, and any parent can ever experience, his mom and dad. So they do need time to grieve, but they will be communicating through us and to all South Africans when the next steps are, when we can say goodbye to Xolani properly. So we'll wait to hear that and we'll convey it. And of course, for Prime Media, his legacy lives on. We intend having internships in our company named in his honor, because that is what this man was. He deserves that. He brought so much and gave so much of himself to us, and we must never forget what he brought to us.
Isaac, Asanda Makaka, thank you so much for joining us on what has truly been a very difficult day. Thank you to you both for coming in.